Good evening, my friend. Welcome to Hercule Mysteries. Where the lights dim, the curtain rises, and truth steps out of the shadows as softly as a breath on glass. Tonight we are in London, where the Thames carries a ribbon of light beneath the bridges, and music spills like perfume from the grand white arches of the Opera Pier. It is a night of gowns and gloves, of diamonds and low laughter, and of a voice so clear it could trouble even the river into stillness. Her name is Elvira Dane. She will sing an encore that stops the heart, and when the last note falls, so will she. Stay with me, mon ami. Settle back, let the city fade to a hush. This is Death at the Opera Pier. Chapter 1. The Final Encore. The fog came early that evening, soft as tulle, draping itself along the Thames and winding through the arches of Westminster Bridge. From the windows of the Opera Pier, the light spilled outward, trembling across the water like a reflection of applause not yet begun. The crowd arrived glittering, fur collars, monocles, laughter that wanted to be overheard. London, that old magician, had promised another trick. The voice of a woman who could make stone remember love. Hercule Poirot sat alone in his velvet box, posture exact, the small hands folded upon his cane. Beside him, Inspector Vale shifted his weight uneasily. They say this girl, Miss Elvira Dane, was a shopkeeper's daughter only last year, he whispered. Poirot smiled without turning. Then she has climbed quickly, mon ami. The air upon a high note is thin. It does not forgive missteps. The house lights dimmed. A hush rippled outward. The overture began, strings sighing like a distant tide, and when the curtains parted, the soprano appeared bathed in gold. She seemed made of the same light that touched her gown. Her eyes, enormous and uncertain, searched the dark rose as though already seeking someone who was not there. Poirot felt the faint tightening of his scalp that always announced tragedy. She sings beautifully, Vale murmured. Oui, Poirot said. Too beautifully. Beauty is rarely at peace. The opera unfolded, love and betrayal in borrowed Italian. But beneath the melody, Poirot sensed another rhythm, a tension that did not belong to the score. In the wings, a man watched too closely. In the royal box, a woman lowered her opera glass whenever the tenor's hand lingered on Elvira's. At the final act, the stage transformed into a garden of moonlight. Upon a small pedestal waited a silver goblet of the closing toast. Elvira's hand trembled as she lifted it. The conductor's baton rose, the orchestra swelled. To love eternal, she sang. She drank, and the note died in her throat. The goblet rang once on the boards and rolled away. The soprano swayed as if bowing, then folded soundlessly to the floor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the audience's murmur swelled into a single, awful gasp. Poirot was already standing. Come, Inspector, he said quietly. The encore will be sung by Death. Backstage smelled of dust and panic. The doctor knelt beside her, the pulse already gone. Poison, he said. Fast. The word hung like smoke. Poirot bent over the fallen goblet. A faint odor rose, almond, sharp, unmistakable. Cyanide. The same bitterness that had shadowed many of his cases. The perfume of impatience. A bouquet of lilies lay crushed beside her. A ribbon pinned with a note. For the one who never sings again. Poirot read it once, folded it, and placed it in his pocket. Come, he said softly. The stage must clear, but the story has only begun. The orchestra's instruments still rested where they had been dropped. The conductor's baton lay broken across the pit. The house had emptied into the wet streets, but the echo of applause clung like guilt. Vale touched Poirot's sleeve. You saw the tenor's face. He looked destroyed. Poirot nodded. Love, jealousy, ambition. 3 notes that always resolve into murder. Let us meet the cast once more, behind the curtain. Chapter 2. The Prima Donna. Elvira. Dane's dressing room waited in shocked perfection. The mirror bulb still glowed. The perfume still hung in the air. A silver brush, a lace handkerchief, a half-written note. Nothing yet understood, it had become evidence. Poirot walked slowly, touching nothing. A woman who fears death still arranges her powders in order, he murmured. Discipline is the final armor. Inspector Vale frowned at the champagne flute on the vanity. Untouched. Because she drank already from the prop on stage, Poirot said, and because she trusted no second glass. A soft knock. The door opened to a storm of scent and fur. Signora Bellini, Vale said under his breath. The older singer removed her gloves as one unsheathes claws. I came to see the child's triumph, she said, and I find tragedy instead. Perhaps the gods of music are jealous. You knew her from before? Poirot asked. From Naples. She was Lina D'Angelo then, my understudy. She took my roles one by one until only Norma remained, and now even Norma is silent. Poirot inclined his head. You are moved. I am furious, she said simply, and swept away, trailing violet perfume and secrets. After she left, Poirot studied the mirror again. On its glass, faint crescent smudges gleamed where condensation had been wiped. 2 bottles pressed here, he said, perhaps one for voice, one for courage. In the drawer of the dressing table lay a small key, safe, open. Inside, a folded card read, Terrace, 11:15 p.m. V. Vale's brow darkened. Victor Marlowe, stage manager, uses a V for signature. Or, Poirot said gently, someone who wishes to borrow his initial. The dresser, Clarice Hart, entered quietly. Her hands twisted the hem of her apron. She was afraid, sir. There were letters, hateful ones. She burned them, but kept the ashes in that bowl. The small bowl by the window indeed held a dust like grey snow. And tonight, Clarice continued, she said, after the encore, I am free. Free from whom? Vale asked. The girl hesitated. From a man who waited by the river, always in grey, always silent. Poirot looked out through the window where fog pressed against the panes. The river listens to everything, mademoiselle. It will tell us in time. Chapter 3. The stage manager's key. Victor Marlowe's office smelled of ink, varnish, and authority. Clocks lined the wall, each marking a cue. Ropes and signal bells hung like the veins of the theatre itself. The man behind the desk was spare, symmetrical, his tie a geometry problem solved at birth. You come to accuse, he said, without heat, or to ask how many seconds it takes for a life to end. Poirot smiled. Seconds do not kill, monsieur. Intent fills them. Victor gestured toward his open logbook. At 9:41, curtain check. At 9:43, terrace door unlocked for private reception. At 9:46, the soprano fell. I know everything. Poirot bent over the page. In the margin, a faint red smear. He rubbed it between finger and thumb. Rose petal, he said. Crushed recently. Victor's composure flickered. A gift. I once sent her roses. She preferred lilies. Yet the card on the bouquet was unsigned, Poirot murmured. You have handwriting that hides itself too well. Vale interjected. Who else had access to the prop goblet? Anyone with curiosity, Victor answered. But the flask was sealed until the final act, water only. Poirot examined the flask. Seal intact. The murderer had not needed to tamper with it. He had simply replaced the goblet already filled. Victor's eyes narrowed. You think I could? I think you could do anything timed to the second, Poirot said gently. You unlocked the terrace for someone. Who? Victor hesitated, then lowered his voice. She asked for it. Miss Dane said she must meet a patron. She was afraid, yet determined. She said if she did not go, he would come in. Name? Vale demanded. Victor looked at him with a mixture of pity and defiance. Ask your brother. The silence that followed was cold as marble. Poirot's eyes flickered between them. Ah, he said softly. So the river flows close to home. Chapter 4. The Tenor's Confession. Aldous Reed's dressing room looked as if grief had walked in and folded its hands. A kettle ticked on a spirit stove. A towel lay abandoned over the back of a chair. A small photograph of Elvira, cut from a newspaper, leaned against a comb as though listening. Reed sat at the mirror with his jacket unbuttoned, throat bruised by the tightness of the evening. He rose when Poirot entered, then sank back down as if the floor itself had tilted. I should have stopped the show, he said, voice hoarse. She was not herself tonight. She smiled, but there was armor in it. Armor is for those who expect arrows, Poirot murmured. Tell me, mon cher, what arrow she feared. Reed's hands, handsome hands used to applause, twisted the damp handkerchief. A man with money and a taste for power. He sent flowers and demands. I told her to refuse him. She said she already had, once, and that the second no would have to be louder. You loved her, Poirot said. It was not a question. Reed's laugh was small and ashamed. I loved the idea of her. On stage, she was the world set to music. Off stage, she was tired. She wanted to leave London. She said that after tonight, she would meet someone by the river and be gone before midnight. No more gowns, Aldous, she said. No more clapping that sounds like rain. Who was she to meet? Vale asked from the doorway, his shadow long across the floor. She would not say, Reed answered. Only that he could change names the way other men change hats. She wore a locket tonight, silver, not the black ribbon with E and A. I begged her to let me walk her to the carriage. She said that opera must end, and then the story would end too. Poirot glanced at the newspaper photograph. Elvira's printed smile had the same brave curve as the real one. Before the encore, he asked, Did you see anyone near the prop tray? Reed closed his eyes. The chorus crossed. Clarice adjusted the hem of Elvira's gown and left. Then, he opened his eyes, frightened by what he had remembered. Then I heard the stage door tap twice. It is a little code for when a patron is expected. 2 short knocks, a wait, 2 more. I thought it was Victor. He uses signals for everything, but I did not see him. I saw only a grey coat moving through shadow. The code, Poirot repeated softly. What is convenient for order is also convenient for crime. Reed's gaze dropped to the kettle. She asked me to watch her glass. She said if it looked moved, I should swap it with the spare on the tray. I meant to. I swear I meant to. But the conductor brought the cue early, and I was late on my line. Only 2 beats, but enough that I ran to my mark. The world became music. By the time she lifted the goblet, I had forgotten everything except the note that was supposed to follow. Poirot placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. Perhaps your failure saved you from another kind of guilt. Go home now. Drink something warm. Do not leave the city, and do not speak of the code to anyone who wears grey. When they stepped back into the corridor, the theatre had quieted to the hum of ropes settling and the soft tick of cooling lamps. Beyond the far door, the river breathed. Vale fell into step beside Poirot. He's clean, he said, not quite a question. Clean as a bell, Poirot answered. but even bells can be used to call wolves. They passed through the wing where the emergency cupboard hung. Poirot paused, eyes half closed, as if listening to a memory. The little glass door showed 2 brown vials, one printed amyl nitrite, the other unlabeled, empty as a confession. On the wood shelf, a faint whiteness remained, where condensation had dried in a hurry. Someone took the bottle at the last minute, he murmured. Not a planner then, a performer. And performers, Vale said, like an audience. Just so, Poirot replied, which is why we will go where audiences are made, upstairs. They climbed to the private boxes. The red velvet swallowed sound. The opera house below lay dark as a lake. In the 3rd box, where the rails still held the imprint of a hand, Poirot bent and saw the half-moon of powder a glove leaves. Beside it, caught in the corner seam, a thread of pale hair. Vale's face was unreadable. He sat here. Oui, Poirot said very gently, and stood here and decided that a terrace refusal would be too small and a stage refusal just the right size. The inspector's jaw worked. He stared out at the empty house as if it were a courtroom. We'll find him. The city will bring him to us, Poirot said. Men who buy applause always return to collect. They turned away from the hush and went back down into the living parts of the theatre, where fear had put on coats and hats and waited to be told where to go next. Chapter 5. The Poisoned Aria. The rooftop terrace was a glass rectangle open to the winter sky, its potted palms like silhouettes of applause frozen mid-clap. The Thames ran below like a ribbon of ink. On a little table stood 2 coupes with a scatter of bubbles clinging stubbornly at their rims, as if refusing to accept the evening's end. Poirot leaned into the cold and watched the river's surface shiver. She would have come here, he said, at 11:15, when the house had emptied and the stars were free. She would have said no, where only the sky could hear it. Vale examined the terrace door. The brass showed no scratches, no impatience. Keys do not fight locks that already know them. Who had this key? Victor kept one, Poirot said. Elvira had a copy in her safe, and anyone who thought initials were invitations could borrow both. He turned to the small emergency cupboard tethered to the wall near the inner stair. There is our merchant, he added. In theatres as in churches, people believe labels make things holy. One swaps bottles and the world looks on, innocent. He opened the cupboard and took down the labelled vial. Behind it, dust had been disturbed in the neat oval shape of a twin. He turned back to Vale. We must ask your brother whether he prefers his evil with or without labels. The inspector's eyes darkened, but he said nothing. On a chair, someone had left a single red rose. A smear of darker red marred the seat where a petal had been crushed. Poirot lifted it with 2 fingers and smiled without humour. Ah, the petal that walked into Victor's logbook, he said. Men who wish to be remembered sign everything they touch. They descended the inner stair. At the base, in the shadow where stage met corridor, Poirot bent and touched the floor. A line had been drawn there in chalk, long rubbed by shoes, the mark where the chorus must stop on the encore. Between chalk and cue, he said, there is room enough for mischief. The orchestra pit was a cradle of abandoned instruments. One chair stood empty, its cushion slightly indented. A violin resting like a sleeping cat, shoulder cloth still warm from a neck that had left in a hurry. On the music stand, a program lay open to the encore. A small pencil dot marked a bar with a tiny circle. Poirot held the page in his hand and counted silently, lips moving with the remembered swell. At this bar, he said, eyes are not on the goblet. A man could take 3 steps, tip 2 drops, and be back to his chair before the note obliges him to play. The violinist, James Larkin, found them there. He hovered at the edge of the pit, cap in his hands, face young and raw. "I didn't do anything," he blurted. "I stepped out for air, a minute only. I heard the cue and ran. I circled my entry because I always miss it when I'm nervous." Poirot climbed lightly up. "You saw someone at the stage door." Larkin's eyes darted. "A gentleman, grey coat, hat low." He tapped twice, waited, tapped twice again. The dresser, Dora, opened. He slipped in like he owned the place. I thought he did." "Did you see his hands?" "Gloves, pale, soft leather. The kind that look like cream." "Merci," Poirot said. "You have the ear of a musician and the eye of a boy. Both see truths men forget." They found Dora in the green room, counting coins with guilty slowness. When she saw Vale, she started and spilled them. "I don't know anything," she said, but her voice was already apologizing. "He gave me a sovereign to keep the terrace door on the latch. He said he was expected. He has given them before." "His name?" Vale asked. Dora swallowed. "Mr. Vale," she said in a rush. "Not you, the other one. Everyone knows him. He sends flowers from the Savoy and expects girls to go faint with gratitude." "The city has many Vales," Poirot said gently. "This one is about to be steeper than he imagined." He looked to the wing where the emergency cupboard had hung sadly all evening, its empty oval accusing the space behind the labelled vial. The theatre sighed around them, ropes creaking, the river telling its old story to the pilings. Poirot straightened his shoulders and turned toward the lobby. "Let us not chase him," he said. "Let us stay very still and let his desire to be seen bring him to us." And like all creatures trained by applause, he came. Chapter 6. The Shadow in the Orchestra Pit. Augustus Vale did not sneak. He arrived. The lobby doors parted for him as if his first name were engraved on their hinges. He wore grey as if the colour had been invented for him, and a smile that could be poured over any situation like varnish. "Brother," he said, warmth like smoke. "You look tired. Was the performance very dreadful?" Vale did not take the hand extended. "It ended early." Augustus's gaze flicked to Poirot. "And the conjurer. What a tiny precision instrument you are. Do you tick when wound?" "I am wound only by injustice," Poirot said pleasantly. "Come, monsieur, we will walk." He did not lead Augustus to an office but to the stage itself, where the house was dark and the air held the last scent of lilies. Above them, the chandelier floated like a galaxy at rest. Poirot set the silver goblet again upon its mark and stepped among the chalk lines as if entering a crime scene in a chapel. "Show me where you stood," he said quietly. Augustus's smile did not move. "I was at home." "You stood here," Poirot said, crossing to the wing and tapping the floor where Shadow waited to be useful. "You set 2 drops while the tenor's back was turned and the chorus breathed. Then you walked 4 long steps to the pit door, descended, and folded yourself into a chair that was not yours long enough to let rhythm hide you. From there, up the inner stair, 2 short taps. The dresser obeys. The terrace door opens for the meeting that would not happen because you had already made sure the only meeting left was with death." "Dramatic," Augustus murmured. "You should write for the theatre." "I do," Poirot said. "I write its endings." Vale held out his hand. "Your gloves." Augustus produced them with a little flourish. Butter soft, the colour of cream, the inside wrist stamped discreetly AV. Poirot turned them and saw the broken crescent of fine white where a crystal had lodged and melted, a ghost of poison. He held up the glove to the footlights as if it too were a witness. You tapped the stage door in a code meant for order, Poirot said, and you used the emergency cupboard as if it were your own sideboard. You left a rose on a chair and a petal on a desk. You carried a key that belonged to the terrace and a locket that belonged to a woman who had finally learned the word no. Augustus's eyes cooled. You cannot prove I touched the glass. Poirot did not answer him. He lifted the goblet, then placed it back down with absurd care. A fingerprint is a vulgar trick, he said. I prefer thinner ropes for my nets. You stamped your initials into your glove. You instructed a house to obey your knock. You taught a dresser the sound of your money. You taught a musician to expect your absence at the bar you marked because you always arrive late to anything that is not about you. He looked at Vale without pity and with love. He will say I cannot prove it, he said softly. Vale's face had gone still. He always says that. Then let us offer him the one proof he cannot bear, Poirot said, and turned to the darkness of the house. Clarice. The dresser emerged from the wing with her hands cupped. In them lay the silver locket taken from the secret seam of Elvira's cloak. Poirot opened it gently. Inside, the photograph of Augustus Vale looked out as if a mirror had been told to tell the truth for once. Behind the photograph, a small visiting card. The initials AV inscribed in a hand so elegant it forgot to be kind. Augustus shrugged. A souvenir of a refusal, Poirot said. She would have returned it tonight. You could not bear to be small in a private room, so you made yourself large in a public one. He turned, suddenly not a performer but a judge. Inspector. Vale stepped forward. The words he spoke were quiet enough not to disturb the dead. Augustus Vale, you are under arrest for the murder of Elvira Dane. For a moment, Augustus looked almost surprised. Then he laughed, a low, dreadful sound that belonged to clubs at midnight and to men accustomed to bending laws like spoons. You cannot arrest money, he said. Non, Poirot replied gently. But we can arrest the man it has been wearing. Two constables, summoned earlier by Vale, moved out of the wings. The grey coat sagged a little as Augustus lifted his hands. He leaned toward his brother as he passed and said something only the two of them heard. Vale did not answer. Silence fell like a scrim. Poirot stood in it and let his breathing slow until the house seemed to inhale with him. After a long time, Vale spoke, voice quiet as ash. If he had not done it tonight, he said, he would have done it another night. Perhaps, Poirot said, but tonight is the only night we are given. We will be grateful for its end. They left the stage together. At the edge of the pit, Poirot paused and looked down. The empty chair waited like a question that had been answered but not erased. He imagined Elvira's last sight. The gold, the light, the little silver rim of death dressed as a prop. He bowed his head, not to the chair or the goblet, but to the courage of a woman who had planned to leave. In the corridor, the air felt warmer, as if the theatre had decided to live. Clarice's heart hurried after them, breathless with a memory plucked like a thread from the hem of fear. Sir, one more thing, a watch, a small lady's watch. I found it in the seam weeks ago and stitched around it so it would not fall. She said it stopped at a time she needed to remember. She pressed it into Poirot's hand. The ribbon was black. The hands had frozen at 11:15. Her own encore, Poirot said softly. The hour she promised herself to go. He stole that time and pinned it to his ego like a flower. It is fitting we return it to hers. He gave it back to Clarice. Keep it with her things. One day, when the noise has gone, the city will want a relic of its conscience. They stepped outside at last. The fog had thinned to lace. London breathed, tired and large and strangely tender. Far below, the river went on being a river, carrying lights, forgetting nothing, forgiving no one, making lullabies of everything that fell into it. Chapter 7. The Inspector and the Watch. The dawn crept over London quietly, like a shy confession. The mist had begun to fade, drawing back from the river to reveal its slow, pewter surface. The Opera Pier stood still, its great white arches empty now, its curtains drawn like tired eyelids. Only 2 lights burned within, one in the manager's office and one in Elvira Dane's dressing room. Poirot and Inspector Vale sat opposite one another at the dressing table, where the bulbs glowed dimly in their brass rings. The little mirror still bore the faint traces of Elvira's touch, the smudges, the crescents, the small ghosts of fingers that had adjusted their reflection for the final time. Poirot spoke softly, as though to the mirror itself. She knew, Inspector. She knew he would not let her go. Yet she came here tonight, not to surrender, but to finish the aria, to end on her own note. Vale rubbed his temples. He used her trust, her fear, and the stage she loved. Poirot nodded. There is no weapon more cruel than admiration. He adored what he could not own, and when she ceased to belong to his applause, he silenced her instead. He turned the little lady's watch in his hand, the black ribbon cool against his fingers. The dial had stopped, its hands forever poised at 11:15, the hour written on the invitation card. She wore this close to her heart, Poirot murmured. She wound it each night herself. And when she died, it stopped, as if it refused to move forward without her. Vale looked up, eyes hollow. My brother will hang, Poirot sighed. He will face justice. Hanging is another art, one the English perform with efficiency. But mon ami, there is another guilt you must not carry. Vale frowned. And what guilt is that? The guilt of family, Poirot said simply. It is an illusion. You did not pour the poison, you did not lift the glass. You have done what brothers rarely do. You have chosen truth over blood. For that, the world should bow. The inspector said nothing. He only reached for the glass and examined it, as though its silence might yield some comfort. How can something so small, he muttered, take a life so large? Poirot smiled sadly. Ah, but everything small holds the key. The vial, the note, the timepiece, the inch upon the tray. Such are the instruments of fate. We build tragedy from details, Inspector, and then call it accident. Clarice Hart entered quietly, her face pale but composed. They've taken the body, sir, she said. The house is empty now. Poirot rose. Then we too must go. The stage no longer speaks. As they walked down the corridor, the boards creaked under their feet, as though whispering their final lines. The scent of lilies lingered still, faint but stubborn. Poirot paused once more at the door to the stage and looked out over the empty house. Do you hear it, Inspector? He asked softly. The echo. Vale listened. Only the faint hum of the city remained. There's nothing. Precisely, said Poirot. That is the echo. Chapter 8. The Unmasking. By late morning, the Opera Pier had transformed from a crime scene into something even quieter. Memory. The constables had gone, the doors were locked, and the river moved indifferently past the pier's white pillars. In the manager's office, Poirot gathered the final threads of the night like a man folding a finished score. Around him stood the remaining cast of truth. Victor Marlowe, his perfect cuffs now creased, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. Aldous Reed, pale and still in his stage clothes, his tenor's hands trembling. Clarice Hart, holding the locket and watch as though they were fragile wings. And Signora Bellini, older and quieter now, her veil drawn halfway down like a flag at half-mast. In the center sat Augustus Vail, once a man of poise, now reduced to a silence that no stage could applaud. Two officers stood behind him, waiting for the final act. Poirot began, his tone gentle but precise. Mes amis, we are gathered not for spectacle, but for understanding. The truth, she is shy, but when coaxed with patience, she performs beautifully. He paced slowly between them. The murder of Miss Elvira Dane was not a crime of impulse. It was a composition, rehearsed, timed, orchestrated. The notes of it were written by ego and played by opportunity. He gestured toward the stage beyond the door. The poison was placed during the encore, that narrow passage of music where all eyes turn toward the tenor and the soprano lifts the goblet. The killer knew the timing, the rhythm, the distance between spotlight and wing. Only one man measured life by seconds. Victor Marlowe bowed his head, ashamed. I timed the cues, he whispered, but not her death. Poirot smiled kindly. No, monsieur, you timed the key that opened the terrace door, and you logged the moment the curtain fell. You were the clock, but not the hand that wound it. He turned to Augustus Vail. That was you, monsieur. You who believed admiration to be possession, who could not bear the thought of refusal in private when you could turn it into tragedy in public. Augustus looked up, his voice low. She lied to me. Poirot nodded. And you answered art with murder. You turned beauty into punishment. You made of her death an encore to your vanity. Aldous Reed's voice broke. You killed the only person who made this city quiet. No, Poirot said gently. He tried, but her silence sings still. He faced Clarice. The letters you burned, they were written by a jealous admirer, but not by Signora Bellini as they were meant to appear. The handwriting was masculine, and the perfume upon the paper, the same cologne worn by Monsieur Vail. He sought to frighten her into his arms. When she refused, he decided to write his last letter in poison. Signora Bellini's lips trembled. Poor child, she was a better singer than I ever was. I envied her, but I would never harm her. I know, Poirot said. Your jealousy was harmless. It belonged to art. His belonged to ownership. He turned once more to Augustus Vail. There was a moment when you could have turned back. When you watched her raise the glass, you might have stopped her. Instead, you waited for the note to end. That is the true measure of guilt, the pause between knowing and acting. Augustus sat very still. Then, in a voice stripped of arrogance, he said, I only wanted her to sing for me. Poirot bowed his head, and she did. Her last song was for you, though you were not worthy to hear it. The constable stepped forward. Augustus Vail rose slowly, eyes fixed on nothing. The air in the room seemed to shiver as the door closed behind him. For a long moment, no one spoke. The city outside went on with its noise, unbothered. Poirot turned to Vail, the inspector. And so the curtain falls. But remember, mon ami, not every audience leaves happy. Justice is not applause, it is silence. Vail nodded. You've been kind to say it. Poirot smiled faintly. Kindness is the smallest key in the orchestra, but it unlocks the soul. He picked up his hat, and together they walked out onto the pier. The sky was pale, the river calm, and the wind carried a faint echo of music from somewhere upriver. A tune that might once have been an aria, now just a whisper. Poirot paused at the rail, gazing at the water. The river forgets nothing, he said, but it forgives everything. Outro. The final bow. And so, my friend, another case drifts into quiet. The stage is bare, the lights are out, and the applause that once filled the opera pier has faded into the soft hum of the city. Elvira Dane's voice no longer echoes through London's grand halls, yet it lingers, in memory, in silence, in the hearts of those who listened. She sang not of love, nor fame, nor sorrow, but of freedom. A freedom denied to her in life, yet granted to her in death. In the end, it was vanity that wrote her requiem, and truth, as ever, that turned the final page. Hercule Poirot stands once more by the river, his reflection trembling in the grey water. The fog curls around him, and somewhere in the distance, a single bell tolls. He adjusts his hat, glances toward the waking city, and whispers to the dawn. Another melody finished, another lie untuned. The little grey cells, they are tired, but they will wake again. For there is always another secret waiting behind the bee. Curtain. He walks away, and the river keeps its rhythm. The lights fade, the music ends. Order, at last, the end.